Our first speaker is Donovin Sprague. Many of you have probably heard Donovin speak. Donovin was born and raised in Dupree on the Cheyenne River Reservation. He will, of course, tell you more about his background, but he's been doing history presentations in the area. He has, I think, 10 books he's written, and is an instructor at a college over in Wyoming, and has just a wonderful background. So I'm going to let him tell you about it, because I'm not going to do it justice. So with that, I'm going to welcome Donovin Sprague, and we will get started with today's presentation.
On Petu Watch Day, it's a good day. Thank you for inviting me here, and I'm really happy that the Sturgis Historical and Meade County Historical Society invited me over here. I wanted to talk about some of the, I don't really have much to say about myself, except, I was born at Dupree on the Cheyenne River Sioux Reservation on the Mini-Koju, Lakota. I teach at Sheridan College. I wrote 10 books. I got my books here if anybody wants a book. So most of my stuff is followed by book signings. I'm over in Indianapolis tomorrow, Indiana, where I go over there and work in the summer. And so anyway, my Lakota name is Chinkahu Wakontia, which translates to high backbone. And eventually that became the people known as Chief Hump. The first hump that raised Crazy Horse is in all the books on Crazy Horse, also from our family. And then the son of Hump is my great-great-grandfather, who was equally renowned as his father. And history has them mixed up because, well, anyway, the second one fought at the Little Bighorn battle on the Custer Hill, and it was not the first one, who died in 1870. So, and the happy anniversary to the 150th anniversary of the 1874 Custer expedition. So I've had the privilege of speaking at several 150th anniversaries in the past, and those included, these are connected to my topic today, and those included, I was the keynote speaker at the Fort Phil Kearny at the Fetterman fight anniversary. That was a few years back, and the Fetterman was on December 21st, 1866, a great Lakota-Cheyenne victory. So then the next fall, 10 years ago or so, it was 150th anniversary of the Wagon Box fight, which is another big Lakota-Cheyenne battle, and not far from Fort Phil Kearny itself, about 4 miles from there. And then, so that's 66, 67, and then this goes chronological, like 68 is the famous Treaty of Fort Laramie, 1868 treaty. And I was going to be a speaker over there. I did go to the ceremony over at the fort itself, but I did speak at the Britton Museum for that in Sheridan, Wyoming. But the next thing, the other people thought, well, all the speakers, they're all descendants, or their grandfathers were treaty signers, and even my friend Mr. Yellowhawk, he drew a poster for the event, and it had all the famous people, leaders who signed the 1868 treaty. And then with mine, it's like, whoops, your grandfather didn't sign, he's not on here. So anyway, I didn't speak as part of that, but I was very proud that my family did not sign the 68 treaty, because Hump and Crazy Horse never signed the 1868 treaty, which moved our people into the agencies, which eventually were reservations. They had, well, at least Crazy Horse, he died But my great-great-grandfather Hump had 14 more years of freedom, living the way they lived. And he eventually went to Canada and with Sitting Bull and held out there till 1881. And he surrendered to Miles, General Miles, I'll talk about that later, at the Tongue River Cantonment at Miles City, which is Fort Keogh today. And so that's where the name Hump came in. They're asking, Miles is asking his soldiers, they're trying to catch Hump and Crazy Horse, and who is this guy named Chinkahu Kantiga, which is my name. I carry his name. And they said, well, what does that mean? And he said, that's a high backbone, is the translation. And it's the hump on the buffalo. That's where he gets his strength and power and all that. And so it was Miles who started calling him Chief Hump. And so that became the name. When they went to the agency, they got first names, Bible names. He actually became Moses Hump. You can't get too much more Bible than that. But none of his people called him that. They still called him Chief Hump. So I don't want to get into a lot of the things that, my friend Paul, I know what he talks about too, Paul Horsted, and I wish him well with his health, who couldn't be here. So I don't want to, delve into too much of the part that they're going to talk about. And mine will be more of the Lakota side and the Cheyenne side, because what were we doing at that time, I mean, you look at all these communities in Sturgis and Custer and Newell and Ludwig and all these things, Fort Meade, and I'm going to tell you more about some Lakota and Cheyenne names that were along with this, that go hand in hand with this. So I'll start then with 1874 with the expedition that came out of Fort Abraham Lincoln, which you probably know. It's over south of Mandan, North Dakota. So that was Custer's base over there, Fort Abraham Lincoln. They come out in 1874. They left on July 2nd, 1874, and their orders were to go out and return by August 30th. So they hit the Black Hills on July 22nd. The expedition, the intention or the idea was to look for a place for a fort. And eventually, from most of the records, Fort Meade, was chosen because of Bear Butte, and a sacred area which was used by several tribes, not only Lakota and Cheyenne, but they knew if they got a fort close to that, they can keep eyes and tabs on the whole American Indian side of things. And also, just as a side note, I worked with the advisory to the U.S. Forest Service, and there are up to 30 tribes who used the Black Hills over the years from archaeological study. And where I live too, I have a house in Rapid City, but I also live in Sheridan, and that number goes up to about 40 tribes over there. So that many tribes have used that in Bear Butte. So the other thing was investigate prospects for which became gold mining. That was suspected that there was gold here. And also to establish southwest, they just called it a route towards the southwestern area. So it's the 7th Cavalry of Lieutenant Colonel Custer, who came out, and they eventually, and I've given programs too, I have all those pictures, that I think when Paul did his book on those pictures, and then that takes a picture in that spot, years later, I have about 3 of those, through the years, where they did, the same thing basically. But they had Illingworth along as a photographer. Illingworth was the photographer, and he took up to 70 plates, which are very vintage photos which we have of the Black Hills, including the very first picture of Bear Butte. And so with those pictures too, I know we were just at one yesterday. We were over between Custard Hill City, and we pulled over right where the helicopter rides are, right there. And I showed the chimney rock to the east there, and then right below was a huge natural cross in the mountain. And people drive by it all the time, and they don't see the cross. But if you stop, I wouldn't advise you gazing over there in summer traffic, you know, you might lose control or something. But anyway, with all of this, with the pictures here then that I have, I included the one with the tent up there because that's Custer on this expedition in the Black Hills. And he's got his famous scout bloody knife with him, his favorite scout from mostly people said the Rickarott tribe, and he liked his dogs, so he's got his dogs there. But the thing that people don't note too much with that is that the tent has NPRR on it, emblazed it's to the left of Bloody Knife's shoulder. And so what that stands for is Northern Pacific Railroad. So there were a lot of, you know, corporate interests in all of this expedition, and there was much more to it than just, well, we're going to find a route and explore, things like that. And then these other two are classic photos. Illingworth actually climbed up here, and Paul has too, and taken a modern picture from that. So this has some of the chronology of some of the events that are going on, and so at this point I want to back up. So from 1874, okay, where were at least our own family of the Humps and Crazy Horse, the expedition didn't see very many Native American people at all, and the ones they did, they documented, and I think if anything, there's a record of being a real lack of people there. But where most of our people were camped at that time from our own family was over on the Tongue River. And they were settling in over there in Powder River country, Wyoming and Montana, the Tongue River. And the reason we had to do that is because the Crow, Tongi, Apsalica is their name, they were coming down, like our winter count records is the most important event of the year, drawn on a hike. And so that's what we used for history and calendar, because there were no books. But those winter counts record, okay, the Crow are down here in the Black Hills. It's right like in our house almost. They're bothering us, they're stealing our horses, they're borrowing our ladies and taking them, and it's kind of a joke almost between Lakota and Crow. You know, they've been at odds or war since day one. So when Custer comes in, and he has scouts here as well, he had up to I think it was like 1,200 soldiers and civilians. So that includes the Rickarott scouts, you know, who were in opposition to us. So anyway, in the backup part here, where I'm going to show just some quick highlights of overview, is that our family was up there to keep the Crow at bay, because that's their home. The Crow Reservation today is right where the Battle of Little Bighorn is today on that land. And so that's the only way we could keep them up there. And so we have a strong military force, which the government called the hostiles. This is the hostiles. They're not the people who were at the agency after the '68 treaty. Red Cloud came in, they call it Red Cloud Agency. Spotted Tail comes in, they call it Spotted Tail Agency. The Red Cloud Agency moves 4 times. It becomes the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. The Spotted Tail Agency moves 4 times, becomes the Rosebud Sioux Reservation. And so our people are still out, so you just call them the hostiles, and they're on that Powder River area there. So one of the first things that happens prior to all of this is, I won't talk about all these, but to back up, first of all, there was a Sand Creek massacre in Cheyenne, of the Cheyenne Black Kettles people in Colorado. And so that's what brought all the heat on, because I'm part Cheyenne myself. All of our men and family married into the Cheyenne tribe. So they have a real interest in this Sand Creek, because it's a Cheyenne affair. And the Cheyenne at that time brought a war pipe to the northern Lakota of our group, and they said, would you join us in warfare against the U.S.? We accepted that pipe and did that, and they took the other pipe to Spotted Tail. He was down in Nebraska area, and he didn't really accept that. He was more for the government and the agency and doing those things. So I just want to walk through a few of these things. The first thing that happened after Sand Creek, this is going to be almost like all warfare breaking out all up and down what today is called the Bozeman Trail. And so above Cheyenne and all that, we've got Casper here. There's a Red Buttes. There's a new video. We got award-winning award last summer for the Battle of Red Buttes, if you want to Google that on a YouTube video. And it's about the Platte Bridge, and then at the same day was the Red Buttes. But this is over at Casper, Wyoming. And really there was one more thing that happened before all this, and it was at Julesburg. So that's in the books of Crazy Horse and all that. Julesburg, Colorado, was mainly cutting telegraph wires and lines and wreaking havoc, stopping traffic, and these little posts, they kept the wire and stuff for telegraphs, and so it was really a lot of problems over there for the civilians, and so the big military engagement though was right here, followed in 1865, July 25th, and this is where Casper Collins was killed. His name was C-A-S-P-A-R, so they misspelled Casper, Wyoming wrong, but it's named for him. And our family, again, the Humps and Crazy Horse was pretty much patrolling at the Tongue River and the Powder and most of eastern Wyoming and what's called the Bozeman Trail, from a line about from Sheridan, Wyoming, down to Casper to Cheyenne, down in there. And so all these engagements happened just straight up the Bozeman Trail. And this is the Platte Bridge here. Okay, these are just some more Platte Bridge stuff here. And then I mentioned, speaking at the 150th anniversary of the Fetterman, this is over south of Sheridan. The Cheyenne named it the Battle of 100 in the Hand. And this is when Fetterman was told not to ride over the Lodge Trail Ridge. And Crazy Horse was a head decoy. He lured soldiers over the ridge. All the soldiers perished. And see, we have stories on all this stuff, like with Custer and the Little Bighorn. No soldiers survived, but all the books are written by non-native people. They tell the story. I don't know how that happens. I review them. I give them nice reviews. New York Times, new book on Little Bighorn. Another person who had no family there, you know, just what they read. And a lot of opinion. This one. But anyway, an original map there. These are winter counts here, and a real big thing for our world anyway, and it's hardly even known, but I did bring this isn't the one here, but I have a winter count that nobody knows about, This is a copy of it here, and it's Hump's winter count, which the world does not know about. There's about 77 events on there, and this is our history, our calendar. And the events start in the middle, and they work out usually on a buffalo hide, and they go out counterclockwise because you're backing up in time. Then the outside of it is like about 1900. That's where they end. So those were confiscated when our people surrendered on the reservations, and they ended up in Europe in museums, and they said, oh, what beautiful artwork they do. I mean, no, that's the whole history of our tribe now gone, of our whole nation of 300 years. These go back 300 years, so they didn't even know what it was. So this was a case too of where I can't tell any more about it at this point. It's such new information. I only gave one presentation in Wyoming about this, but I have an unreleased book called Hump and Crazy Horse, which will explain all of the information. So anyway, they usually come with captions. Each one is a story, and one caption could be a long story, a small book in itself, and they were summarized by the interpreters when they confiscated them. So like the one with the Fort Phil Kearny at the Fetterman fight, it says 100 white men died, and there's saber, soldiers holding a saber. And so this one came of the Hump one, came with nothing. So see, they've lost the translation of what it all means. But because of my research in winter counts, it only took me 2 days to positively identify every drawing on here of what it was. And the reason for that was because it so closely matched other winter counts of our tribes and fellow tribal members, because there could be 10 or 20 of these winter counts across the nation, and they usually chose the same event, not always, as what was the most important event. And sometimes most important events weren't put on there, like Little Bighorn didn't appear because they feared repercussion, if they promote that too much. So these are, just go through some more. This is a Fetterman monument then over there. This is right where Fetterman went over the hill, and the ridges over behind are right where some of the main battles took place, and right where the monument is was kind of the whole ending of that. The Bozeman Trail with Wagon Trail still intact goes right across those two bluffs, and then you go on north is Sheridan, Wyoming. And then we get up to 1867, there were two events going on back-to-back days. August 1st was the hayfield fight up by Wyola, Montana, and then August 2nd was the wagon box fight. So this is wagon box here. So whoever fought at one was not at the other because of the distance. This bugle was attributed to Metzger, who fought gallantly, they said anyway. Our people said that one fought gallantly of the soldiers, and they all died, but that's how his bugle was all trampled up where they found that. And he was the only one. They honored him by wrapping his body in a buffalo robe, and they didn't, it was an honor thing. And the wagon box, that's where it gets its name, kind of, they jump in those wagons, they're logging back in the hills over there. Right on that bluff over there in that top picture, another thing that's not well known, Hump and all of his wives, the Cheyenne wives and family were up there observing the battle from that. So it does say that if you walk the battlefield, it has signs in it. And I rode up there before with a four-wheeler. And actually, I've been clear to the mountaintop on horseback at the Bighorns there. That's some interesting stories from that. few minor injuries along the way. Little rodeo on the way, unexpected. And then 68 treaty, coming around, I'm doing chronological right down the line, Red Cloud and Blue East of that. It sets up the boundaries over there on that side, which would be diminished finally. And then by the time of this, they're at Fort Laramie here. These are some of our people here. And then soldiers over there are in the tent over there, headmen. And then the boundary of the yellow there would eventually evolve and shrink down to the present western South Dakota. And the other would be taken as unceded or surplus land. That they said the hunt was no longer justified. And what the hunt was the buffalo were going extinct. And so they said the tribes didn't need that. So with 74 then, with the Custer expedition, that's a key thing, because when the gold was discovered, so I'm not going to talk about all the gold and the impact and all the names of the mines and the Hearst family and all that stuff, not going into that. But that's a reason, see, to change this boundary, which the 68 treaty, in an article, it said it could never be changed unless 3/4 of the adult males agreed to this change. So after the gold discovery, naturally they wanted the Black Hills, and they sent the Allison Commission out over by Crawford, Nebraska, and they had a council over there, and the council broke up, and Lakota did not sign it away. In fact, one of them, Little Big Man, who figured in Crazy Horse's death, even he was with Crazy Horse, and he rode in and he said, I'll shoot the first the first Lakota who tries to sign this. And the commissioners, they were frightened. They went back to Washington and passed the Act of Congress, which just took the Black Hills. It's like on that 103rd or 4th meridian, dotted line runs right, down not too far from where we're at here, but it chops off the Black Hills. So that's how it was just lost with a swipe of the pen right there. And the name treaty quit. In 1871, U.S. Congress said, we're going to end treaties, the name, because it sounds kind of archaic, like, you're sitting down and smoking a pipe and doing this and that. But they continued to make what's called agreements and amendments. And so like the Black Hills, when that was taken like that, it was called the Black Hills Agreement by 1877. So, see, it sounds like the tribes agreed, not an agreement at all. It's just the congressional wording. So the next part here, if you've been over to Fort Laramie, the river comes right through there, Platte. And up on top, that's all that remains of the original fort today. That's like an old hospital walls there. And it's been rebuilt real nicely there in the center to how it was, and the lower one there, and the parade ground is all there. One of the most famous forts of the West. But after the 68 treaty, the Lakota and Cheyenne burned the 3 forts, and they burned Fort Phil Kearny. They burned up there at C.F. Smith. That's where the hayfield fight took place. They burned that one, and they burned Fort Reno. That's over by KC, Wyoming. The Crazy Woman battle took place over there. Now the 3 forts are burned to the ground. Our group of hostiles declared a victory over the U.S. right then. And the soldier U.S. side, their reports say it's no longer feasible to maintain these forts. We're going to withdraw. Well, yeah, it's hard to maintain them when they're burned, down. So at that time, there were no non-Indians in that area. It was all that attack the Lakota-Cheyenne again, and then that's when the treaty comes in. Every time, kind of like the Indians get the upper hand across the country, then it's time for a treaty to, we'll get things done that way. So anyway, that's some of the events that are going on there. Now I'd like to get more into beyond the 74 expedition. Of course, gold had such an impact on America, and there were a lot of stories that most people don't even know about that we've discovered. With even leading up to the Little Bighorn, what would be the coming up next I'm going to touch on is these were what they did. They said the main story is that in this happened. They said if the Lakota and Cheyenne, these hostiles, don't report into the agencies by January 31st, 1876, that's just before Little Bighorn and all that, they will be declared hostile and thus at war with the U.S. We're going to go out and find them and destroy them. But really, there are some West Point records where they had a secret meeting in as early as November prior to that, and these plans were made. Grant was president, and we studied Grant's peace policy, and Friends of the American Indian, these church groups who were very supportive of Native people, but they weren't getting the full story either, because they had a secret meeting with all these generals, Sherman and all of them, and the plan right there was to have a big buildup out here and for warfare and get these forts going. One of the big ones was up there, Crook, right there at Sheridan, Camp Cloud Peak. That's one of the really arms build-up places. They're sending wagon loads of ammunition in there. And meanwhile, with all of this, every bit of it, our family is conducting warfare. And so the first thing that happens after Crook Lake is in place, he's right there in Sheridan, right downtown there, and June 17th. So this precedes the Battle of Little Bighorn. It's the Battle of the Rosebud, and the Cheyenne named it the battle where sister saved brother, because it looked like this warrior was going to face certain death on the battlefield, and this woman rode over in her finest regalia, came down on the field and rescued brother. It was her brother out there. And so they rode off over the hill. All the soldiers are firing. That's on a ledger drawing there depicted of that. Nice and colorful. And then as a joke, they said after she rode over the hill to safety, they all jumped off and did high five. Yes. But if you look, you can see below the horse's head, on the neck, brother's head is visible there, sticking out. He's clung to this other side of that horse, and his arm is wrapped around the top of the horse's head, and that's his. It looks like a carbine, like a Springfield or a Sharps rifle right there. So that's the way that it's named. And my students, they get confused about the Battle of the Rosebud because, well, I taught for a while at Lakota College too. And, Rosebud Reservation down here, and then the Rosebud took place clear up by the Battle of Little Bighorn in Montana. So I like the name Battle Where Sister Saved Her Brother, And my chapter on this event in my book, that's the name of it. It's called The Battle Where Sister Saved Her Brother. And so this is, look at the time frame, June 17, 1876. Crook goes out from Camp Cloud Peak at Sheridan. It's about, maybe about 35 miles over there, just up into Montana, over by Decker, just right by Decker, Montana. And they'll have a victory over there, Lakota and Cheyenne will declare a victory. So there's a lot of stories of all that. And if I didn't mention this, but Hump and Crazy Horse are at all of these events that I am talking about. And so in that particular battle, Crook will retreat. He gets he thinks he's getting low on ammunition. And the big thing is, see, they're all supposed to rendezvous days later at the Little Bighorn, the Battle of the Little Bighorn. And that famous, they called it a three-pronged attack, where Custer, again, would be coming from his base at Fort Abraham Lincoln, just like with the Custer expedition. He goes out to the Little Bighorn. And meanwhile, Crook, he goes back to Camp Cloud Peak, and he's got 1,000 men. And before that, he was waiting. It was actually about 1,300, because he had some Shoshone and other native scouts who were enemies of Lakota and Cheyenne. So that was about 1,300 people. And so they go back to Sheridan, Cloud Peak, Bighorn actually. And so what's really cool about all this on the soldier side is diaries. There's so much valuable information in soldier diaries who were there. And there were newspaper correspondents too, like from Chicago, who were on the expedition, keeping a day-to-day diary record of everything. So that is very helpful to piece in with my winter counts, you know, to get a picture of that. So anyway, Little Bighorn happens days later, and where's Crook? He's supposed to be there with 1,300 men. He's down in Bighorn fishing. And so we look at the soldier diaries again. Okay, what's he doing on June 25th, the Battle of the Little Bighorn? He's fishing over there at Bighorn. Wow, this is great fishing, the big fish, and we're having such a great time, you know. Whoops, Custer's getting killed, you know. So that didn't go over so well later, but and then some people speculated that, so what would have happened with 1,300 more men? Would have that changed the outcome? And we usually say it would have just taken a few more minutes, you know. But anyway, then the famous battle comes in of the Little Bighorn battle, and so I have a program at the Journey Museum. I think it's about 10 years straight now. Every year I've been on June 25th. They said you got to be at the Journey for your annual presentation, but this year it's on June 30th, so they moved it. Anyway, this is a picture here in the museum of all of our leaders here, and so a lot of those are my family over there. There's Gall up there on the right, and my grandfather Hump is on the left, second from the top, and Crazy Horse is drawn there because there's no proven picture, so I like that. It's a drawing of him. And the famous Sitting Bull, he's in the center there, and some other, you know, Cheyenne participants. But I like to put names with all these, and women's names as well, because what we get, you know, on the native side, all the events I talked about with the Bozeman Trail, it's called Red Cloud's War. Okay, we got that covered. All those events. That was Red Cloud's War. Most of them, he was not even present. And a vast territory like that, no, not even 10 leaders could be in all those places at once and conduct that. And then, see, he goes to the agency. They build a house for him, a Red Cloud Agency. So it's really these hostiles, what the government calls is who is leading these. So I have a lot of stories about the Little Bighorn battle. I have winter counts I collected. Hump was interviewed in the early 1900s before he died about the battle, and I got quite a bit of information from that. My title in my unreleased book, Hump and Crazy Horse, is called The Music of the Bugle. Now, how does that fit into Little Bighorn battle? So our women were digging up teamsala, this prairie turnips, when the soldiers came in, and they heard the sound of the bugles was the first thing, and they screamed and they ran to the village to alert, the village that there were soldiers coming in, and they knew all of this stuff was going on because of the battle where sister saved her brother. They know right where the locations are, and then nobody ever presented it like this. I'm giving you some inside stuff from my book. Nobody, in all those books I reviewed, nobody ever covered this part. I said it was the biggest religious gathering of the year. It was Sundance time. The Sundance happens on June 21st. And now it's like, well, whenever I can get off work and vacation time, whatever. But it happened on the solstice, in the old days. By the way, the Fetterman fight was the solstice also, the winter solstice, December 21st. But anyway, Sundance is, starts on solstice, is June 21st, runs 4 days, 22nd, 23rd, 24th, and that's when Custer is arriving, see, the 24th. What they're observing is, this camp is breaking up. A lot of them are leaving. Well, the area, they had about, close between 8, maybe upwards to about 18,000 horses grazing out there, and they just shaved that land down quickly. So they were always moving into different smaller camps, so they never came together in groups like that. So they're leaving, and Custer says, look, they're going to get away. Let's rush in before they get away. Well, they didn't get away. So anyway, that's just one part, of that people look at it differently, like two sides square off, and it wasn't like that at all. They tried to get away, they kept moving further west and west, and the same group that was at the battle where sister saved her brother had just moved over about 35 miles further on the Little Bighorn River. So these are just pictures from there. There's I also have a relief up here, if anybody wants to look at it, that I brought, that shows the battlefield of the relief. And so I have locations of where our camps were, and most of Hump was injured over on Calhoun Hill, which is like right about where this, right here. And so a lot of the heavy fighting took place. That's where a lot of the markers are. They have distributed of the soldiers there. And then the Last Stand Hill up there. And so when they separated the soldiers on Calhoun Hill, Crazy Horse and Hump and some of the Cheyenne split the soldiers up on that ridge there, and that's what changed the whole thing. Now soldiers were a lot more dismounted, and warriors are always after the horses. That's the prize thing, go after the horses. So a lot of the soldiers by this time are running towards Last Stand Hill at that time. So a lot of them went down there, and they described it, our warriors, as a buffalo hunt. It's the same way we hunt a buffalo. We try to pin off a few, separate them from the main group, and that's what they were doing. And as overall, there's the whole field there, the whole battlefield from the south end where Reno comes in first, and then our camps were up towards this end here. Crazy Horse and Hump made a dash to the south end. Reno comes in, and he's got the famous Bloody Knife with him, who was in that picture. And Bloody Knife, actually, this sounds kind of gory, but he was hit in the head, and his brains actually splattered all over Reno's face. And that's when it makes sense in order that Reno lost control of his command at that time. His orders didn't make sense. They formed a line, and he said, mount up, and dismount, and retreat, and he was given conflicting orders, so it's all chaos, and soldiers are fording back the river. This is the ridge that high there. So they're climbing up that high. This is the middle one, is the south end. But Crazy Horse and Hump arrived from the north. They had to prepare medicine, get ready, look good, comb your hair a little bit. But by the time they got there, they said there's a big bunch going that way. And Custer is about in the middle then, where that red is. That's his route. And the last Reno's bunch see of him down in that valley. He has a hat and he waves from up above. And that was about the last they seen of him. But Hump and Crazy Horse never got in on any of the Reno fight. That was over, and they're making tracks. You see down towards this end, Calhoun Hill is where that happened. And then the little swing down there to says Custer Hill. Back in the old days, the Cheyenne said, the elder said, well, they fought at the visitor center, where the visitor center was built. And they all laughed at them. They said, don't listen to them, they don't know what they're talking about. Well, the fire happened in 1984, and that rewrote the Little Bighorn history because it burned, and they picked up all new artifacts, and they even traced bullets, like they could tell where a soldier was or a native, and shell casing there, and matched up the bullets over here. But what they proved was those people knew what they were talking about. They did fight right there at the visitor center. And they said, wow, those people were right. They knew what they were talking about. And then the very last thing, they went to the Last Stand Hill from that. And our stories with our family was that Custer was pretty much mortally wounded down on the river side there. And when they retreated, two soldiers came in on each side of him, and he was just kind of in the saddle, and just barely moving. And they helped him up to Last Stand Hill, where they just propped him up there. And of course, that's where the final. There was another exodus, like where it says the Last Stand Hill. It's called. You can't hardly see it. It's written this way. It's got a black arrow going up. It's called Deep Ravine, which a lot of people know of that. But a bunch of them, panicked soldiers, went to Deep Ravine at the very close of it, and they got in a hornet's nest because a lot of the younger boys were there holding horses, and that ravine was full of basically the enemy. So they didn't last long there. And so there's so much to talk about, with that subject. And after that, the surrenders would take place, but we had some things such as locally, the Battle of Slim Buttes, Crook again coming in, that's up north of us here by Buffalo, South Dakota. So that's some of our people coming in trying to surrender, and they come under attack while surrender. So we have I have a chapter pretty much on this too. This here picture was, some of them were staged later, but they told American Horse, this was a camp of Iron Plume, actually. But they had told American Horse, if he flew the U.S. flag outside his teepee too, that no harm would come. Well, they had a 7th Cavalry banner flag from the battle itself. And all kinds of artifacts from Little Bighorn are in this camp. And Captain Miles Keel's gauntlet beaded gloves said GK are there, and a lot of things that were taken from there. So Crazy Horse and Hump were about a day's ride west from there. They went to get them for help, and they arrived just when Crook is coming down this way. He's headed to Deadwood, and he gets lost. He comes down, it's muddy and rainy and all that, and they kind of end up over there. My uncle's place is over at Deer's Ears, over in that area. So they end up at Deer's Ears, and they know where they're at, and they kind of steer back, So that's another crisscrossing that kind of parallels with some of the Custer expedition route as well, comes down through there. So, just some final notes there. Then there was a dull knife fight and all that. But these surrenders that took place then, this is from our family here. So the drawing again of Crazy Horse up there. There'll be five surrenders from our family. Crazy Horse, and that's my great-great-grandfather Hump there with his 2 Cheyenne wives who were sisters, and his first cousin is Crazy Horse. His other first cousin is Touch the Cloud over on that side, who was known for his height. So as he grew, they named him Touch the Cloud. He was about 6'9", 6'10". And then a dull knife is from the Cheyenne. And these sisters, Cheyenne sisters, are from the dull knife family. So that's why these camps and battles you find, okay, Hump's there, Crazy Horse is there, Touch the Cloud. It's all family. It's not like, okay, the Cheyenne are moved in over here, Red Cloud's over here, and then we have Sitting Bull here. So I'll tell you the story of these surrenders. Only less than a year after the big victory at Little Bighorn, April and May of 1877, they made the surrenders which ended the wars in this whole area. So Crazy Horse, they're all up on the Owl River. It's up off of the Tongue. It's over around, I had an aunt and uncle that lived up in that way. The Samuelsons had a place up there by Broadus. It's a little bit south of there. But, and it's a Powder River battle was up there too. But anyway, these 5 were all camped there. They wanted to separate these, never have them together again. So they sent Crazy Horse to the Red Cloud Agency, which we talked about, Nebraska. And they sent Spotted Tail, actually, I didn't mean Spotted Tail, Touch the Cloud. He's the Minicozu too. But they sent him to the Spotted Tail Agency where Spotted Tail was. And he would later transfer home to, we're all from Cheyenne River. He would transfer back to Cherry Creek. And Dull Knife's story was he would flee to Oklahoma, Indian Territory, and back. You know, that's another story there. And then the other one, who's not on here, is Lame Deer. He was killed during his surrender. Lame Deer, Montana is named for him. The only one out then is Sitting Bull. He's went to Canada. So he's free out there in Wood Mountain, Saskatchewan. And so later then, after Hump's surrender to Miles, he scouts for Miles for a while. And he eventually goes back free again, and he joins Sitting Bull in Canada. And so then they'll all have about a 1881 surrender. So my great-great-grandmother is seated next to Hump there, of the 2 Cheyenne sisters. And then Hump has a hat band on it says Hump on his hat band, big letters there. And the war club was buried with him. He used that in the battle at Little Bighorn. We have several 7-footers in our family from Touch the Cloud. Good basketball teams every other generation. So anyway, I guess the only other thing I wanted to add to this was that my friend Bob Lee, I worked with him a lot as a historian, and I know he would have been here if he could have, and he had befriended Dewey Beard from our family. Dewey Beard called Hump his uncle. His Indian name was Ironhail. So he was kind of like a Ben Black Elk in the Badlands. Him and Alice, his wife, would greet visitors and all that. But anyway, Dewey was one of the survivors of not only the Battle of Little Bighorn, but the Wounded Knee Massacre as well. And he's one of those that Bill Grothe, another friend of mine, photographed in 1948. You see those pictures like at the Rapid City Airport and other places, but Dewey is in there. But Bob had this, he worked for the Rapid City Journal like way before I knew him, and he had this pipe, really beautiful pipe that Dewey Beard gave him, and but he said he couldn't prove it. He said, we know that, you know, and I looked at the pipe and I recognized it, like, you know, and anyway, I collect photos. So I found a photo of the pipe with Dewey. So it proved, you know, that it came from him. And so Bob was ever grateful for me with that. So there's actually a picture of Bob holding that pipe. And that was a good story. That pipe is, and my picture is at the Crazy Horse Memorial, right there where the visitor center sign-in area is. And then the Mrs. Dode, was it? Dode?
Dode.
Okay. She was a good friend of mine too. And I pulled out another picture. I said, well, here's Dewey Beard. This is like early Rapid City, downtown Rapid City, right at I worked at the Prairie Edge. And he's standing out front of Prairie Edge, and it looks just like it does today. And then there's a second story window up there in the background, and she said she lived right up there. That was her window up there. So that was an interesting story to go with my photographs. So anyway, let's see. We said it could be an hour and a half, and it's been an hour already. So I guess I'm kind of open. I've got books that I have available if anybody wants a book, and some other. These are the family surrenders that I just talked about: Crazy Horse, Touch the Cloud, Hump, and Dull Knife. And the other one would represent Lame Deer reservations. The one on the right with the purple would be how the reservations evolved today. That's the Indian lands of what was left. And I asked my students, I say, you know, what state has the most reservations? And they'll think like Arizona, or it's actually California. See all the, they call them Rancheria, Hispanic. And Canada, First Nations. Mine is in the middle there, South Dakota. The upper part, the block together, is Standing Rock and Cheyenne River, which is very large. And then in the south, we got Pine Ridge and Rosebud. So with all those are my books there that I have today with me, some of them. And so with that, from 1874 and these events, by 1890, of course, was Wounded Knee. Hump became a ghost dancer with Sitting Bull, a famous ghost dancer. Most of the people who died in the massacre were from our community around. They called a lot of them Takini, means comes out alive. Red Scaffold, Cherry Creek, Bridger, and Sitting Bull had been killed in the north, and Standing Rock came down, and his followers came down to Cheyenne River, joined Hump, and their other first cousin went down in history as Bigfoot, but his real name was Spotted Elk, and they can't get that stopped now. They put in a Bigfoot Memorial Highway, Bigfoot ride, but he was a generous person, and he always was giving to his people. So somebody needed a footwear, like a boot, some said a shoe, and he gave that to them, and then he got one from the agency that was an army issue, and it was way too big for him. But when he walked around, he said, "Si Tonka, Si Tonka." That means Bigfoot. 1 foot's way bigger. See, but his real name was Spotted Elk. No, our family didn't call him that at all. And they usually called somebody by brother or sister or uncle or auntie. You know, they tried to make a family connection. And like they always said, Gall and Hump, famous Gall was the Hoot Papa was a warrior at the Battle of Little Bighorn. A lot of books said him and Hump were brothers because they were big and they looked alike. And but see, we know they had a ceremony called the Hookah ceremony where they adopted each other as brothers. They were good friends, so there was no blood to it, but everybody's still trying to figure out the genealogy and the blood thing, and they won't find it, you know. So things were different, and the wives, Hump had 4 wives, so headmen had multiple wives because woman was cooking and feeding people and making things and give away, and it enhanced the Itancha or chief standing. That enhanced that, and one person couldn't do all that, so they had several wives like that. It was very common. So some of the thought behind that is different than the non-Indian society. He had one of his wives was a Crow, a captive, and they killed a family member down here in the Black Hills, a drawing that's in the winter counts. He went on revenge and went up there, went right into one of their camps, and that's a story too that's recorded. And he took a bunch of horses and this prize Crow woman. And so that kind of stuff back and forth was kind of like another day at the office between Lakota and Crow, back and forth. So in 1908, Hump died, and the first 1905, Touch the Cloud died, and Crazy Horse died in 1877, only 4 months after that surrender to Camp Robinson. And so Red Cloud died almost exactly a year to the day that Hump died. Hump died December 1908, and Red Cloud December 1909. And as a bigger picture, of course, Spotted Elk, Bigfoot was 1890. Passing of all them, and even Geronimo was in there, like the next January 1909. But with the passing of that, it was the end of an era for our people. These warriors were no more, and there was a different way in here, and they sent our new leaders to Washington, and they all came back. There's these pictures, even on the cover of some of my books, everybody's got a headdress. They're all chiefs now. They come back home, and the traditionals say, what? This family, they never were a chief. How did they get to be a chief? Well, it was like bestowed on them, in Washington on that trip. So the next thing, of course, I do in a lot of things, but government came in because they outlawed the government, the traditional government. The Sundance they outlawed. And so the winter count is a very important thing for me that I have, and I guess the other thing that I give presentations on sometime in this area is the Utes, and I gave the Utes. They had an exodus in 1906, 1908, where they ended up at Fort Meade to Cheyenne River to Thunder Butte. At descendants of those, I gave them a tour at all these stops from across Wyoming and all that, and they were descendants of those that ran away. So that history was a lot of newspaper articles from here, and one of the camps that they come in, well, Belfouche B has stuff where they turn school out as the procession of the Utes came in. They're taking them to Fort Meade. They camped over here, stories of the locals here visiting them over here by the Black Hills National Cemetery. That little church over there on the opposite side, that's Alkali Creek there. We had a ceremony back there. They did a bear dance, stomp dance back in there. It was traditional. And so our tribe, Cheyenne River, adopted the Utes, Northern Utes, as a brother and sister-like tribe because of that life there. And then just finding artifacts and all that, I was thinking of there was a photographer at Fort Kearney, and Ridgway Glover was his name. He took photographs out there, and they said, you can't take pictures of a battle, you know? And he's out there with his tripod getting all set up and taking pictures. But anyway, one day they went out, Ridgway Glover, he's laying face down, killed, you know. But before he died, he sent his glass plates, I think 70 some, back to Philadelphia, where they never arrived. And a friend of mine from Smithsonian won an auction and suspected this might be something, but they found his glass plates just, you know, not too many years ago, 6 or 8 years ago. And they developed them, and they thought, wow, the first picture of Fort Phil Kearny, because it was one of the most famous forts of the West, no picture known of it, and maybe there'll be a picture of Crazy Horse in there, or, you know, not that good. But anyway, the pictures then ended up in Cowboys and Indians magazine, and I was an advisor for their group writing. But anyway, the pictures were all Abraham Lincoln's funeral procession. So it was a big thing for Abraham Lincoln, you know, history buffs, but none of ours. It was Lincoln's funeral procession, like in Chicago and Philadelphia and Washington, and his favorite horse, you know, led the procession. But you never know what's out there. So about every presentation that I have, there's almost like new information like that comes up. It's like, wow, you know, there's this stuff out there. But anyway, how about any questions that anybody would have?
I have a microphone here. If anybody has any questions, I'd be glad to bring it to you. I had a quick question, because this is fascinating. I really appreciate your being here. Wonderful, wonderful presentation.
Well, thank you.
I guess my question is relative to, because you've got almost a first-person narrative of a lot of this stuff. And, you know, I've heard the stories, I've heard other people talk about it, that there was a belief that, you know, Custer was killed at the Little Bighorn as kind of almost his destiny for invading the Black Hills, so to speak. Is there any true oral tradition about that, or is that just something that we've all made up in our own heads?
Well, I think that various books have tried to include accounts of like the Crow stories especially, and some of those are kind of not so first person, because although their reservation is right there, they become the storytellers of this because they're there. Even today, the tours, they call it Absaroka tours. You take a tour of the battle. It's the Crows telling their story. Well, when they led Custer in there and he said, you can go now, you've done your job, they didn't have to be told twice, you know, over the hill. They went and they got out of there. So they don't have that story. So yeah, you will find different stories from different families about that, and recognizing the names, you know, who actually was recognized, and some were mistaken between Tom Custer sometimes because of their dress, and his brother George. And I wanted to say also that I was a keynote speaker at Monroe, Michigan. They have a Custer Week every year, and it's a big blowout. And so they had a native person. It's all about Custer, you know. I was wondering what was going to happen to me when I get over there. But it was the greatest experience. I mean, there's still Custers right there across the street. There was a leather shop there, and some of the Custers were out on the farm. They came into my program, and they all went back, see, as widows after leaving Fort Abraham Lincoln after Little Bighorn. And so the last day I was there, they brought in this bow, and they gave me this bow that those widows had brought back. have been in the Custer family. And it's a Lakota-Cheyenne bow. And they said that belongs with you because we've had it in Monroe. And so that bow sometimes I bring it out to programs, but it's in the Timberlake and Area Historical Center Museum. They said, why don't you put it where some of your people can see it? So Timberlake is kind of right at the crossroads of Standing Rock and Cheyenne River. And so they're very nice people, you know. I loved it up there in the stories, and that's where you get different stories of the Custers and did they really recognize him and who did and who didn't. And Walter Camp, when he interviewed Hump, he said, I like Hump's story the best. He interviewed all these people, and he said there was a lot of dust, and he said a lot of them couldn't even get into the final battle because it was so hectic, and so they just kind of rode around the side. The other thing I thought was really interesting, remember those famous Last Stand Battle of Little Bighorn Budweiser? Big signs. I know there was one in our Dupree Poo Hall growing up, you know. I shot pool and I looked up, wow, it's huge, you know, Budweiser. Custer's always there with his saber, the last one to go down your middle, and he didn't have a saber. Most of the sabers they left at home, you know, and he wasn't the last one down. But there is another version of that, and I should have wrote his name down, but another famous one. It's the other one you see, kind of an alternate. But a lot of people don't realize that guy researched, and he talked to about 20 of the main people, including Hump and Crazy Horse, that were right on the hill. And so he made his drawings of them very accurate. And the others are just kind of warriors. But so I have that number, like 1, 2, 3, and Rain in the Face, he talked to him. Call, he talked to him. He talked to Hump. And so it's good to cipher out, you know, some of that, you know, the primary sources, I guess. I tell my students to try to get as close to the horse's mouth as you can as we try to, for their first-hand sources. Kind of a long answer to your story.
Oh, no, that's wonderful. That's more than a lot. I saw several hands. I'll go right here and work my way back.
Hello, Lexi. I was wondering, with the new NAGPRA laws that just got passed, if we'll be receiving artifacts for our tribe, if that's anything that will affect us.
That's a very good question. Welcome to my relatives here from Colorado and California and Oklahoma here today. Love you guys. But yeah, work with the tribes have what's called THPOs, Tribal Historic Preservation Officers, and they're in charge of that. There's federal funding for that, and all this stuff they can come back under that. You know, that if you receive federal funding at a museum, you're required to file these artifacts and let those tribes, which could be maybe 20 different ones that could possibly belong to let them know. So I'm a consultant with them. So right now, last week, I never made it out, but I already seen them. The Wounded Knee items, there are up to about close to 100 items that were brought back from Massachusetts just recently. And they were out at where I sent Takini. They were at Cherry Creek Gymnasium last week for a display for the descendants to view. And then those are going to go to Standing Rock from there. So yeah, and there's, I think the only law that I think is really needed that I see from working in it, because I'm an archivist for Cheyenne River too, and I'm also the tribal historian for the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe. But the law that I've seen that is needed is one to stop our artifacts from going overseas, because Sotheby's or whatever will have an option of Pueblo, whatever materials, ceremonial, and there's no law that stops that. They can go to France or whatever. So anyway, that's a complete change. The Smithsonian used to be in the business of keeping everything there. You pull out a drawer, and I've actually done this, and here's a skull and a skeleton, and even locally in Nebraska, same way. There's places where they said, well, you can look in there, but there's a skull in there, Indian head. And I've even had them in my possession before, that people gave them to me because I might know what to do properly with them and get them buried or placed somewhere. So I work all across the nation with tribes on that. We met with the Indiana Potawatomi Tipo and up by South Bend last year. And I worked with the Choctaw Nation for 3 years. I worked with the Potawatomi, so I know my own history and tribe, but other tribal history too. I teach the history of all tribes in universities. We start in Southwest and end up in the ice cap, the Arctic.
Wonderful.
Okay, any other questions?
Some other questions here? Right here. Okay.
Ladies first, I guess. Thank you. The MHA Nation in North Dakota, Fort Berthold, I've lived there many years and I worked with them quite a bit around behavioral health and mental health issues. And my question is, because Fort Lincoln was Mandan, and that's where Custer was, and he took off from there, and I remember those pictures in North Dakota, but I didn't hear you talk about the Mandan and I don't know about Arikara and Hidatsa, but I know the Mandan, they were involved in that battle too, were they not?
Yes, they were, and there were other tribes as well that I didn't mention, but one thing with the Mandan, in fact, one of my best friends is Gerard Baker up there, and he used to be superintendent at Mount Rushmore. Gerard, he's one of those touch the cloud guys. But really just a connection there too with the 3 affiliated tribes is where they're located today in North Dakota, the Arikara, Mandan, and Hidatsa. But the Hidatsa connection, then I've seen that with over where I'm at in Sheridan. So we look at these buffalo jumps, and so we have pottery like from Missouri River. A lot of people have seen that kind of gray-black pieces of pottery. It's all over in Missouri River, and bone fish hooks and that. Well, then in the buffalo jumps right there at Sheridan in the Bighorns, first thing we find is that very same pottery. And it's like, okay, what's the connection? How is that? How can that be Hidatsa? And then see the Crow were part of the Hidatsa over here. And see, they broke off to be a mountain crow and a river crow over there in Wyoming, Montana. And so when they get together, they can perfectly understand each other's language. So that's kind of interesting. Of course, the Arikara, we could never dislodge them out of this area until smallpox. All those tribes had smallpox, devastated their tribes, to small numbers, and then they moved up there, We actually pushed them tribes up there. So a lot of interaction too. Gros-Ventre, Mandan, Hidatsa. Our family met Lewis and Clark at Fort Pierre. More documents. They're in the Lewis and Clark journals. My great-great-great-great-4-great-grandfather was Black Buffalo, who tried to take the boat from Lewis and Clark. So then they go on up to the Mandan village there. Then Sacagawea comes into play there. They take her on as a guide, that story. If not for George Catlin, who opens up, I think it's the first page of my book. We've got Lewis and Clark, and then 1834, George Catlin. This is photography for our people didn't come till the 1860s. So Catlin was a great artist. He drew our people at Fort Pierre. The first one he drew opens this page with one horn. He said, I'm going to draw him first because he's a head leader of the Minicoju division. He said he could run down a buffalo on foot. He put on a display there on the west bank of Fort Pierre. There's a buffalo herd there. He took in after the buffalo on foot run up to the biggest bull there and drove the arrow right into his heart. So those are journal stuff, see, is really important. And then things like, well, how are you related? Well, my family tree, this is our oral history. Oh, don't worry about that oral history stuff, it's, what book is it in? Well, we didn't have books. Okay, who befriends Hump? And my other grandfather I haven't even talked about on the other side is Fred Dupree, and the Dupree family. That's where I'm from. And he was, Fred and my great-great-great-grandmother, his wife, Goodek woman, were in that Buffalo documentary last November with Ken Burns and Dayton Duncan on the, the story of the buffalo and all that. But who befriends Hump when he comes into Canada? They want to know about this guy. Wow, he's done all this. Who comes out? Doan Robinson, who was the brainchild for Mount Rushmore state historian, and Stephen Riggs, great historian from Fort Pierre. Everything's Riggs High School down there named for him. But they befriend him and they get these stories. Hump only speaks Lakota, but he said that the present living Hump that I interviewed at Cherry Creek, his grandfather is Black Buffalo, who met Lewis and Clark. So wow, now it's the truth. We already knew that, but then Fort Pierre had I think it was their 75th anniversary or something, and they honored 7 or 8 families through the history down there, and 2 of them were from my family. One was Fred Dupree, and the other one was Black Buffalo. So they had floats, and we were kind of flipping coins to see. I could ride on either float because I was related to both of them. And there were no other descendants there from Black Buffalo, so I rode on the Black Buffalo float, But it's just all these connections. Hump, I didn't even say both Humps, father and son, was born right here at the base of Bear Butte. And that was a place for our women to come when you're ready for childbirth over on that east side on the creek over there. There's eagle cache pits over here that Lakota, especially Cheyenne, used and documented. Joe Medicine Crow told us about that, and we found them over there. They would conceal themselves in those and put a covering over their ranches, and the big eagle sweeps down, have a little rodent out there with a sinew tied on his leg, and he pulling that in, and just as the eagle comes down to get that, you've got your hands really protected with buckskin gloves, and then reach out and grab that eagle, eagle tension. And some of those swing spans, are 18 feet wide, And I was just gifted a whole headdress. I mean, they're just the feathers from a bald eagle from one of my students. So at the university, they have all these methods. They measure what you're doing and how good you're doing it. And every semester, I said, well, look over in that corner, so-and-so's grandmother from the Crow gave me that picture of Chief Joseph because I helped her grandson, and here's a fresh baked bread over here my students made, and it's like, okay, there's my evaluations. Can't measure that, but so it's in the heart, When you know your history and genealogy, it gives you strength. And bravery, generosity, respect, wisdom. It keeps your values strong. And when you know your family history and where you come from, that is powerful. Nobody can take that, from you. And I find as more people even get older and join historical societies, which I hope many of you would consider joining this one here with Sturgis and Fort Meade, they get interested more, in this story because a lot of them come to me, our tribe was like, they're going to do something with Touch the Clouds. They said, we're going to do something, build a center school. And I said, well, he went down in history as plural, but his name is Touch the Cloud. So I thought, well, that's a start right there. Oh, okay. Write that down. Back when I grew up, I'm a bow maker. I make bows and arrows, and I'm a flute player and flute maker, and tan hides and all that stuff, and know how to start a fire out here tonight if I need to, But, those are things that are important that people need to know. And so many of our young people have lost that. They don't know that, A final story, if I could share this, I went, it was a guest speaker, not like checking in, but I was at the South Dakota Pen for a couple visits as a speaker. And so the first thing I went in, so just like this, and the first thing I noticed is, wow, this looks like a high school group of people, all in the penitentiary. And this is the native population. And so we talked about stuff, and talked about history. And one would say, what family, where were we at? And I said, well, you were connected with over here with this family's Stiosh extended family. And they'd look over, what? But they liked all that. Next thing we were done, they just swarmed me up there, and they just felt connected, and they wanted this history. And because the fathers, they either never had parents or whatever, and they didn't have that handed down. They have no idea. So they're trying to emulate maybe Hispanic culture or African American culture. They have their own rich history like that. So the next year, the counselor said, well, they want you to come back again and do another presentation. I said, okay, what should we talk about this year? And they said, Donovan, we want the very same stuff, because they didn't have all that, and so did that. And I know there was one guy sitting back there, and he was kind of hardcore, and I knew he was going to ask me a difficult question, and he said, he said, that's real nice, but he said, you're different than all of us natives, because you had all this handed down to you. They gave you that history, and we didn't get it. And I said, no, I told him a story that fire chief told me, our trailer house burned down when I was a little baby, and me and my brother were pulled out a window and rescued, and the only thing that survived the fire was our neighbor, Artist Vanderveer, gave me a little baby shoe. That's all I have from that life, But I learned all that stuff by myself, talking to elders and grandparents, who I wasn't raised with, but it's out there, And after I told him that story, he was kind of like this, like, okay, you're one of us, I see. So know your history.
Yeah, one more.
Sure.
You mentioned the meeting in November of 1875 at West Point. And my understanding is from that meeting, they went out and ordered in December of 75, ordering everybody to report their reservations by the end of January of 76.
Yeah.
Do you think if that timing was purposeful because of the weather up here as far as getting the message out and also reporting if they wanted to, so that the Army would have an excuse to go out and round them up?
Yeah, well, one thing that's always comes up was with the January 31st, 76 deadline, people said, well, they were in camps. A lot of them never even got the message. It was too too cold, they didn't know about it, or they did. But the other part of that is that the meeting was, the records are at West Point, but the meeting itself was in DC with Grant and those generals. And so that's where it was decided, we're gonna have a big arms buildup, we're gonna have war. And meanwhile, the Washington Post is like, okay, here's the Friends of the American Indian Society. Okay, Grant, how is your peace policy coming? Oh, we're doing very good. We're meeting with, they were lying to all of them. And same way with the generals, they weren't telling the public the true story, that an all-out war was already planned and in the works to drive out, extinguish basically the American Indian, anybody who would not come in. And those orders are simple. The big expedition of the Powder River was huge through here. The only orders were to punish and destroy the Indians there. They just come in and they ended up being punished by the environment. They couldn't make it. They didn't know how these Lakota and Cheyenne could thrive through areas like Crazy Woman Creek to Gillette and Wright and all those places. And there were a lot of battles. They ate their horses. They went barefoot, and they finally retreated back to Fort Reno down there by KC. Sawyer Expedition, all them, Cotter. Reno was named Fort Cotter for a while. And they issued a report on that whole expedition, which kind of swung up through Powder River up to about Broadus, and then they all retreated back. But they wrote glowing reports of all the Indians they killed. This was successful. It was a successful campaign, and none of that happened. Other soldiers in their diaries said none of that happened, but then they found out, they got beat, they lost the war. But you don't get it like that, It's like not feasible to maintain the forts, And another thing too, it's so sad that a lot of the settlers were told to come west too, and it was safe. It was not safe at all. They were entering, and they wanted this development people to come in and eventually form, a town and all that. And it was not safe on the Bozeman Trail. Several places they declare them now safe. It doesn't happen.